Good morning, Team Alabama. We have a new Achieve 3000 this morning, Women Who Won the Vote. Please join me in reading the stretch article. Do your before reading poll at this time. Vocabulary that may be new to you. The words are outlandish and suffragist and vitriol, okay? Outlandish is very strange or unusual, extremely different, outlandish. And a suffragist is a person in the past who worked to get voting rights for people who did not have them. Okay, and vitriol is harsh or angry words. Okay, those are our new words that we may encounter today in this article. Please join me in reading Women Who Won the Vote. Okay, make sure you've done your before reading poll. Thousands of women marched calmly as the crowd closed in on their procession, slapping, tripping, and spitting at the demonstrators, while law enforcement officers looked on and often looked away. It was 1913 in Washington, D.C., and the parade was a pivotal movement in the decades-long quest for women's voting rights in the United States. 7 years and countless public demonstrations later, in 1920, the suffragists' hard-fought battle was won. Now, to commemorate the centennial of the 19th Amendment's ratification, Women's History Movement Month 2020 celebrates the suffragist movement, valiant women of the vote. Among them are those who ramped up the pressure on politicians with parades, pageants, and picketing, actions that defied the boundaries of acceptable behavior and changed attitudes along the way. Okay, guys, I'm going to pause for a second. What is that figurative language device when we use the same beginning sound? Parades, pageants, and picketing. Okay, that's something that we need to know, and that's called alliteration when you use that same beginning sound, like Sally sold seashells down by the seashore. That is alliteration. On with the article. By the time suffragists began adding these public displays to their national strategy in 1908, activists had already worked tirelessly for 60 years to secure voting rights for women. Still, despite their efforts, many people considered the idea of women voting outlandish. A few individual states allowed women to vote, but the suffragists petitioning of federal government officials had failed year after year. Generations of women had told lawmakers that women should have a voice in government. Finally, many suffragists thought it was time to show them. They chose the eve of the President Woodrow Wilson's 1913 inauguration for the first National Women's Suffrage Parade. Staging such an event was a bold move, but with the crowds and the throngs of news reporters already gathered in Washington, D.C., it gave activists the biggest possible audience for their demonstration. Swathed in white cape, astride a white horse, lawyer Inez Milholland Boussevain led the procession, followed by thousands of banner-carrying marchers interspersed with floats, bands, and mounted brigades. As an estimated 500,000 spectators lined the streets, the walkers marched in groups by state and or profession. Men had their own section too. Picture perfect proof that people from diverse backgrounds all over the country wanted change. By the end of the day, more than 200 parade participants were injured by angry onlookers, but despite this, the resolute marchers continued their trek calmly. News stories spotlighted the women's resolve in the face of violence and vitriol, and many Americans were appalled at the crowd's reported behavior. More parades and pageants followed in subsequent years. Keeping the momentum moving and the public pressure on politicians piling up as the events drew more supporters raised additional funds and kept up suffragist morale. But there was still work to do. After several meetings with Wilson, the president still wouldn't commit his support to the suffragist cause. So in 1917, some women took the fight to Wilson's front yard, becoming the first people ever to picket the White House. About 2,000 women from 30 states took shifts, holding signs, some of which featured quotes from Wilson's own speeches to call him out for supporting democracy abroad while denying citizens' rights at home, denying women. Dubbed the Silent Sentinels by newspapers, these women protested 6 days a week for more than 2 years, often enduring violence from those who opposed them, especially after World War I started and their patriotism was questioned. Many were arrested, charged with obstructing sidewalks, and thrown in jail when they refused to pay the fines. Some were beaten and tortured in custody. Word of the violence brought added sympathy to their plight, and soon more people were beginning to believe women had a right to actively engage and have a voice in their own government. Change was close. Finally, in 1918, Wilson called on Congress to pass the 19th Amendment, guaranteeing women the right to vote. By 1920, 35 states had voted to ratify the amendment, but 36 were needed for it to become the law of the land. The remaining states wouldn't consider it or reject it outright, except Tennessee. On August the 18th, 1920, anti-suffragist Tennessee legislator Harry T. Byrne shocked the room with his yes vote, an act that led to the state becoming number 36. In Byrne's pocket was a letter from his mother telling him to support the amendment, a final bit of pressure that changed the course in history. Okay, guys, please do read your article at your level and do your activity, Women Who Won the Vote. Have a great rest of your day, Team Alabama.